In recent years, health providers and policymakers have recognized the high personal and financial costs of readmission to the hospital. Health policies have changed to promote better care to avoid hospital readmissions and assess penalties to hospitals for failure to provide better transitional care services. A key program being adopted in Oregon is the Care Transitions Program, although it is not available in all communities. Some of the steps they take are consistent with some of the things that Susan Denser talked about. The Care Transition Program involves helping patients and their families schedule and complete follow-up visits with personal physician, ensure medications are correct, learn to recognize warning signs that the condition is worsening, and maintain updated personal health record to facilitate communication. People with dementia are at high risk of delirium. Delirium is sometimes confused with dementia because it is associated with confusion, disorientation, and impaired cognitive function. However, it is different from dementia in that its onset occurs within hours or days, and it can often be reversed. The consequences of untreated delirium are severe. It should be considered a medical emergency. The Mayo Clinic defines delirium as a serious disturbance in a person's mental abilities that results in a decreased awareness of their environment and confused thinking. The onset of delirium is usually sudden, often within hours or a few days. Delirium can be caused by many things. Medications is one of the most common and occurs when various medications have adverse interactions, or dosages of medications that have not caused problems in the past may be the problem now if the person has lost weight or has had other physical changes resulting in changes in the way the medications are metabolized. Anesthesia is another common cause of delirium. Primary care providers and nurses can consult with pharmacists to determine the extent to which medications are causing delirium. Infections are another culprit. Urinary tract infections are a common source. Infections in the mouth, or pneumonia, or other illnesses can be causes as well. The major risk factors for delirium are age, dementia, and frailty. The risk of delirium increases as dementia progresses. The symptoms of delirium and dementia can be similar, and input from a family member or caregiver may be important for a doctor to make an accurate diagnosis. The symptoms in bold should be an indication that evaluation for delirium is warranted because these symptoms are different from symptoms related to dementia. These include rapid onset, inattention, and fluctuating symptoms. That is, when a person seems to track at one moment, not at the next, and then can track again. Delirium is pervasive in hospitalized older adults, particularly in those with dementia. It occurs 4 to 5 times more often in people with dementia than other older adults. Research indicates that most delirium goes untreated and unrecognized. It can take weeks or sometimes months to treat. The consequences of delirium frequently are life-changing. Even with treatment, it is not unusual for a delirium to lead to permanent cognitive and physical decline. Delirium can start a downward spiral of deconditioning. This contributes to falls and incontinence. Malnutrition is common, and so is poorly managed pain. About a third of those who acquire delirium will die from its complications. Dennis had congestive heart failure as well as dementia and was hospitalized. His daughters were able to advocate for Dennis when he was in the hospital. In part, this was because Sally was knowledgeable about delirium. Let's see how she describes this situation.
This hospitalization was really difficult for all of us. Dad had never been mean or aggressive, just, kind of ornery with us. But he started shouting and hitting nurses in the hospital. I think he was really frightened, but he was also saying some really weird things about what the doctors and nurses were doing with patients in the next room. Now, this was really different. And at first, the staff didn't seem to find it concerning. They said they had experience with people with dementia and, they'd soothe and reassure him, but I think they also sedated him so he would sleep. I called the options counselor because I remembered that she gave us some information about what to do in case Dad had to go to the hospital. So she reminded me about delirium, and she resent some information about how to identify it in people with dementia. So I took that information to the hospital and insisted that they check him for it. Oh, man, Lola really helped here. She kept calling his doctor. She looked up articles, and between us, we finally found someone who would listen and understood that Dad's behavior was really different, and it wasn't just because of the dementia. So once he did the assessment, then they could figure out what was wrong, and they helped get his system back into balance. And he's much better. He's not quite the same as before. I mean, his balance is worse, and he's more confused. Can't be alone. And we've increased hours for the home care workers, and my husband and I are sleeping here a couple of nights a week. We'll try it for a while and see if Dad can get better. Oh, Lola's coming for a week in a few days. I'm really glad we did all that planning. I know which assisted living community Dad likes the best, and I'll talk to him in the next few days. I mean, even if it works at home for the next couple of months, I know it's time to be getting ready for the next stage.
The most important thing that Sally and her sister did to advocate for Dennis was to insist that major changes in behaviors had happened quickly and that they changed throughout the day. They also insisted that the medications used to sedate Dennis in the hospital be evaluated by the pharmacist to determine if they were appropriate for Dennis or if they were contributing to the delirium. The ADRC helped to prepare Dennis's family for hospitalization by providing information about delirium. The options counselor had told Sally about delirium. Other things options counselors can do are to provide tools for preparing for hospital admissions if possible. Families are really important in providing person-centered care information to hospital staff. Options counselors can help families advocate for the person with dementia, coaching them to ask about delirium, what the hospital is doing to prevent delirium, and signs for the family and staff to watch for to identify it as early as possible. The options counselor can also connect people to transition care services, whether through the ADRC or through the hospital discharge system. More information about delirium in people with dementia is available through the Consult Jerry website. This includes assessing pain in persons with dementia, wandering behavior in hospitalized older adults, and assessing and managing delirium in persons with dementia. Many people with dementia are cared successfully for at home for the rest of their lives. However, others need additional support. The family caregiver may be old and frail. The family may not have resources for the home modifications required, or for the round-the-clock care that may become necessary. Behavioral expressions may become too difficult for families to respond to. Oregon has many options for residential care settings outside of the person's or their family member's home. As you know, many, if not most families, do not know about these options. Recall from Module 6, Bill remembered his mother-in-law's bad experience in a nursing home. As far as he knew, a nursing home was the only option for caring for his wife besides caring for her at home. He had no knowledge about the many changes that have occurred in the way long-term care services are provided in nursing homes and in other residential care settings. The ADRC website has a wealth of information about these settings. Family members may find the MOVE Consumer Guide to Person-Centered Long-Term Care helpful. MOVE stands for Making Oregon Vital for Elders, and is a coalition of providers, advocates, educators, and other community members dedicated to culture change in long-term care. Another useful document is the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care Services. ADRC staff and partners are critically important to helping people with dementia and their families explore various long-term services and support options. It is important that these conversations begin early. Options counselors and other staff members can inform the person and family members about the many different options, stress person-centered care approaches, find the best matches available to the person, review ADRC resources in the person's community, help families plan for the transition, and let families know how to stay involved following the transition. Regardless of the planning decisions about moving into residential care, these decisions are very difficult. Recall that Bill was adamant that he would continue to care for Sarah himself. In spite of Sarah's early direction to put me in a home, Bill couldn't face it. Here's Ashley describing what happened when circumstances changed and their plan for care at home was no longer working. This was about 3 years after her first meeting with Sarah and her family.
Joyce and her brother were really worried about their father. He was seeming really tired, and they also said that he was having heart problems. Along with all that, he was worried about Sarah. I think she told me one time he woke up from his sleep and found that Sarah was gone, and then he found her a few blocks away from the house. He's just really tired. So, talking with Bill's daughter, we have found that she's been having some behaviors that are difficult for the family. They're gonna need some extra care, but it's still possible for her to stay in home. And also, the daughter and the son, they've talked to Bill about getting respite care for Sarah as well, which I think would be very helpful, and they should start thinking about that.
Ashley met again with Bill and his children. Sarah was present but was dozing through the conversation. Ashley referred back to the what's working and not working tool and asked him what was working and not working for him. He admitted that Sarah's wandering was worrying, as was her increasingly aggressive behavior. Ashley suggested that Sarah be evaluated for pain or some other physical cause for the behavior. The options counselor also referred back to her notes, reminding him what had been important to Sarah. One of those things was that she not be a burden. Sarah's daughter reminded him that she and her brother had visited foster homes and assisted living facilities and had identified a couple that they wanted to show him. At first, Bill was not convinced that care practices had changed enough since his mother-in-law's experience so that Sarah would have a good life anywhere except at home. He also felt like a failure for not coping well. After a few more months of increased formal support at home, however, Bill decided it was no longer working and went to visit some of the places that his children had found. Ultimately, Sarah moved into a foster home nearby. Here's how Bill described it.
Sarah is no longer really in a condition to talk about things, but I know that from my sense of how things have been in recent months, she feels very safe and secure in this place. And the people who care for her, who touch her and talk to her, are very gentle. I'm pleased that they allowed me to continue to be involved in caring for Sarah. It's brought out a level of patience in me that I didn't think I was capable of, at least mostly. I don't know why we waited so long to come here. She's calmer, so I can be calmer, and vice versa. She never wanted to be a burden, and she was always saying that. She remembered what it had been like to take care of her mother during those long 2 years, and she was so exhausted. She's glad I don't have to do all those things for her anymore, and also that I can be there with her some of the time. I'm glad that we could plan for this, and I don't think she's going to be left in a bad financial situation. It's good all around.
Helping Martha transition was more challenging. She lived at home with some success for many months, although continued to cause worry for her neighbors and options counselor. She had a home care worker who could take her to the store and help her with her bath. She adjusted to giving up her car, received Meals on Wheels, and had a senior companion once a week. One day she fell and broke her hip. After it was repaired, she went to a skilled nursing facility but was not able to regain mobility. However, because she had a person-centered plan, the options counselor could work to arrange a guardian who was able to move her to an adult care home. The staff at the adult care home used her history and continued to support her. They knew she enjoyed all activities that involved children, and she was frequently at the jigsaw table. Being in a foster home with children was good for Martha. She became more animated and more engaged in her surroundings. We will talk more about guardianships in the final module of this series. In summary, in Module 7, we have talked about the team performance model, looking at performance and renewal issues, and concerning what happens when a plan is no longer performing well and a new plan and action is needed. We discussed the psychological transitions, including looking at depression and caregiving. We also considered transitions in physical settings. This included safety at home, the risks for delirium during hospitalization, and changes in residential care settings. In Module 8, we will focus on a range of advanced planning and end-of-life care issues. In some ways, we have gone full circle. Although Module 8 is the final module in Tier 2, we will be discussing content that needs to be part of the earliest conversations with people with dementia and their families. Thank you for your attention. Here are some people who made these modules possible. This training was developed by Portland State University on behalf of Oregon Department of Human Services, Aging, and People with Disabilities. Funding for this project was provided by an Administration for Community Living grant, and funding was partially provided by the Oregon Legislature for mental health training. This concludes Module 7. Please click on or copy this link and complete the short evaluation form. We want to know your opinions about the module and how to improve programs in the future. Thank you so much.